The biggest difference, if we just want to get right to it, the biggest difference is having the woodwind choir with high school and college marching bands versus drum corps. So that is a scientific acoustic frequency difference. That's also, if you think of it in terms of pieces of the pie, making sure that woodwind choir has their time on task, their exposure, that is the biggest difference in juggling. And not to get to nerd out too much, but that is a different puzzle, and we're trying to live in the same space, usually in an indoor dome with woodwind choir, brass choir, percussion, and making those elements and electronics. I mean, that's an equal component as well. Yeah. Making sure that those voices are clear. I've had kind of the mantra of do the small stuff really well. Do the little things really well. Whatever's in front of me, and it's hard. There's days where I don't want to, so I'm confessing, but just do what's in front of you versus dreaming about what you might want to do 6 months from now, or, wow, I want this thing 10 years from now. I was out of drum corps for 10 years. And instead of waiting around for an opportunity, I really tried to do the little stuff that was in front of me. So if that's a little band from Tennessee, or that's a big band from Indianapolis, I really think that is the secret to my success, if you want to call it that, is just really doing the little stuff, and that led to more stuff. And also having healthy relationships,
Hey everybody, it's Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. I'm here with Clif Walker, super guru of the world of percussion writing and performing and instructing and all that stuff. Clif, how are you?
I'm great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to be talking with you. We're going to be talking about, you arrange for all kinds of groups. We're going to be specifically talking about the difference in arranging for marching band versus drum corps. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. But Clif, I've known you. I was thinking about this. I think I met you around the year 2000. I moved to Orlando sometime around then, or the year after. I got connected with you and Rick Cox at that wonderful program at Timber Creek, and loved working with you guys for a while. So that's been a long time that we've been friends and working together.
Yeah, 24 years, pushing 25. So
okay, see now I no longer do the math. This is one of my rules. Whenever I'm thinking about friend, how long have we known? I'm trying to no, but that is a really long time. And of course, we've collaborated so much. You've written wonderful percussion music for many of my marching arrangements over the last 24 years, and always made my arrangements sound much, much better than they were originally. So it's been fun doing that.
Yeah, and that experience for me, I mean, I think we're over 100 shows together. That was a real period of growth and just experimenting and trying stuff. And you always made it super easy working with your arrangements. I still love it, and I was able to just have freedom to try stuff. And I think a lot of my development came through that period of time. I learned a ton doing those arrangements. So
well, that's very neat. Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, and like I said, I learned a lot from you, of course, because I think you're one of the primary people that taught me to leave so much space. Let you have space for the front ensemble. Let you have space for the battery to do your thing. The more space I ever left in a show, the better the thing turned out. Of course, especially with your writing. And I also think that, I came to appreciate how important the percussion music is to a music arranger. Like I used to just really worry about my part, the wind music, and I realized, of course, it's half the show. It's half the musical show. So
it's a great voice, and with that variety, not just bringing the show to life and making a great product, but the educational option for those students, and on the adjudication side, have that secret weapon of using that conceptually and musically. It's kind of a win-win, and having that space, thinking, we think about the score vertically, having that space where we think about all voices, not just one, that's half the battle right there for sure. Indoors and outdoors. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, you've written for every kind of group, indoors and outdoors, at every kind of level. Do you want to? I don't know if I should ask you to list some of those off. Of course, you were very recently at Cavaliers, and you guys had that phenomenal season. with winning high
Yeah.
drums a couple years ago, and now of course you're starting your tenure at Carolina Crown, which I'm really excited
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been amazing. It's been a great. We started back in August actually, and I've been working really hard ever since. Yeah, on the drum corps front, I loved my time with the Cavaliers was amazing. Learned so much. Now with Crown, on the marching band side, the Florida scene there with Timber Creek for a long time. Came up, wrote for, and taught at Blue Springs High School here in the Kansas City area, where I still am. And I've had the great fortune, writing for groups like O'Fallon, Carmel, Fishers High School in Indiana. Just some amazing programs that I super super grateful and lucky when you're working with that caliber of teacher and student. It's amazing. But I've also really enjoyed, and it's a similar experience, the younger bands, the smaller bands, setting them up for success. And it's a different puzzle. That's a different, maybe even podcast, just the big
Right.
bands, little bands, competitive bands, Friday night bands. But yeah, just I, and we're not going to talk numbers because we don't want to age
Okay,
ourselves.
that's okay.
But having done this for a while, just all those experiences just put different tools in the toolbox. So when I really feel excited when I open up a new puzzle, and just like, okay, what do they have? What don't they have? What's the goals of the program? All the parameters. And I've just gotten better at kind of anticipating and outsmarting some of those. There's still challenges, but yeah, it's I love that every group is different. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's sort of the fun for me is I often feel like I do my best work when I have a lot of limitations, so writing with a group and all of a sudden they've got two trumpets that can hardly play. And
Yeah,
I've got, okay, what do I have? What can I make? How can I make this work? Like that is fun.
yeah.
Sometimes I feel like it's really almost helpful to have. That's
It's
one of the things I kind of, not to jump ahead, but that's one of the things I
yeah,
wonder about when you're working with a top level drum corps where like anything is possible and everybody's great. I feel like all the limitations are off the table. Does that make it harder?
yes,
Or is
it
it just
does.
like, yay, I can go? Because I feel like I write to limitations so often.
Limitations definitely expedites the process. So not that it makes it better, but it's easier to make decisions. If you only have I always think of a box of crayons. If I only have these colors, then those are the colors I'm using. So like with the Carolina Crown, I have the jumbo box of everything that I could ever hope for, and then it is more time to make those decisions. I wouldn't say it's easier, but it just takes more time. To to be like, well, we could do this and we could do that, and there is, this kind of gets into the heart of the discussion. The goals of a given group kind of drive those decisions. So if the goal is a Bands of America Music for All sheet versus a Drum Corps International sheet versus where there's a percussion caption, there isn't a percussion caption. And I even ask my clients this, high school clients, what are your goals? No wrong answer. Do we want to win percussion? Do we want to win big picture band? Do we want to win both? And that's usually the answer, unfortunately.
Of course.
It's like we
It's like
want,
when I
yeah,
ask them, like, do you want to be entertaining for the Friday night crowd or do you want to win every contest? And they're always like, well, we want both. And sometimes you
yeah,
can do that, but that's yeah.
yeah, that's harder. But that helps direct my decisions too. And the biggest difference, if we just want to get right to it, the biggest difference is having the woodwind choir with high school and college marching bands versus drum corps. So that is a scientific acoustic frequency difference. That's also, if you think of it in terms of pieces of the pie, making sure that woodwind choir has their time on task, their exposure. That is the biggest difference in juggling. And not to get to nerd out too much, but that is a different puzzle, and we're trying to live in the same space, usually in an indoor dome with woodwind choir, brass choir, percussion, and making those elements and electronics. I mean,
Sure.
that's an equal component as well.
Yeah.
Making sure that those voices are clear, making sure we can hear what we're wanting the audience to hear, and that's the biggest difference. And also the sheets, what's driving. If there's a group, and again, no judgment. If a group is like, we want to be educational, do this, we want to be entertaining. But if a group also says, hey, we want to do all those things but be very competitive, then there is some considerations from the sheets perspective to have in the back of my mind while I'm writing. Like, this is really cool for percussion, but this is gonna get in the way of that woodwind color. Let me rethink this. So again, it's a puzzle, but knowing which idiom you're in, knowing the goals of the program, and also the venue. I tend to default to an indoor, Lucas Oil type setting. But there are some bands that say, hey, we never play in a dome, and I do approach that differently. And drum corps, no brass or no woodwind, all brass. That's a different decibel. That's a different frequency, and that makes some different decisions in the percussion voicing for sure.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I feel like, now I don't want to go off in the weeds on this at all, but I do want to sort of mention that I feel like a lot of instructors and designers don't pay attention to their sheets very much. They just write the show they want to write. And I don't like to get too far into that, letting the sheets dictate, but I think a lot of times they don't have the competitive success they want because they didn't pay enough attention to really, what's your most important? Is it your state contest? Okay, what are the sheets and what are they rewarding and what are the balances? And like, you have to pay attention to that. And you mentioned it, of course.
Yeah, and guilty as a young director and designer of just like, I have this cool concept. I love this concept. I believe in this concept. We're doing this, and not taking the opportunity to also filter that through the criteria that it's going to be judged against. And I've been fortunate to judge Bands of America, to be on the WGI roster now for 5 years, and that awareness from the judge side really helps me make great decisions on the design side. I feel I'm more aware of the sheets. I'm more informed of how our hard work is being filtered and received and processed.
Yeah.
And there's intangibles. I mean, it is art on a certain level. Their concepts there's so many amazing creative people out there, but then there also are requirements. There are, known public, non-secret criteria that we want to make sure we address and incorporate. So that, I did a lot of the left brain, right brain tests, when I was younger, and it could have changed, I guess, but I was consistently down the middle because I really have a balance of creative. I want to do this crazy thing. I want to try this, but then also, how are we going to teach that? How are we going to clean that? How is that going to be received? Do those frequencies work with those? It's. I think it works really well in this facet of my life. It might be frustrating in others, but yeah. But you're totally right. Considering the judge sheets, I don't think that's the end all. I don't think that's what we're doing day one. But after you have your concept, after you have, you're kind of on the path, then looking at those and considering and going, wait a minute.
Right.
We don't have range of variety in our show. Where's an opportunity? Oh yeah, that's similar. Maybe we could do something different here. So that can help inspire creativity, I think, if it's used in the right way, for sure.
Yeah, I love the way you said it. You sort of filter. You use it as one of the filters that you look. Okay,
Yeah.
Now that we have this, let's filter it against that criteria and just check it. And as you said, sometimes it inspires the inspiration and the creativity. I love that you described yourself as in the middle of the right and left brain, because that is certainly the way I think about you for sure. Like you, and I feel like that's kind of a drummy thing. Like the
Yeah.
super creative drummers that I know, the percussion writers, people in the percussion world, I feel like they have a great way of finding that balance because they're very technical and it's very, like that's how percussionists are. Like if this is how it has to be and we're all going to do it exactly the same way, and like that's very cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's an advantage perhaps that percussionists bring to the table to try to find that
Yeah.
balance.
And I don't even know how we get to that point. There might just be a natural process, where we kind of get filtered out, and the more balanced, end up kind of in these roles. Because I agree, there's a lot of creative people, but also have that practical, logical approach to what they're doing. And I've met, not to stereotype, but there's been some visual designers that I'm so jealous of because they're just so free and they just dream these amazing concepts. And I'm just like, well, how are we going to make that fit on a truck? How much will that cost? What happens if it rains? And I sometimes wish I was a little bit more on the just, wow, let's dream big side, but I think success with what we do, it has to work. It has to be practical. It has to fit on a football field. It has to match so many parameters of the student ability, the instrumentation, the frequencies, yeah. So there's a lot of logic to.
Right, and I think that on every design team or creative team of any sort, you should have all those different sort of types if you can. So there's somebody that's being very logical and logistical in the thinking, and then you have the people that are just blue sky, what can happen. It can be, I will admit, it can be challenging to work with some of these visual people who don't seem to understand the context and the parameters, but that's our job, is to sort of rein them in and help them see, and that's part of collaborating. So you mentioned the sheets and you mentioned the instrumentation. Is that the primary differences if you're sitting and going to write for a drum corps versus a band?
Those are the biggest. Those were definitely the biggest. And honestly, I do think the two idioms have more in common than they have different. I really do. I mean, length of show is different. Used to be the venue was different. Drum corps used to be primarily outdoors. And well, it just depends on the region. It depends on the area. That is a factor, but it's not a factor exclusive to drum corps or marching band. But it's something that can really change your decisions if a group is going to be inside all the time or a group is going to be outside the majority of the time. Because in both activities, we have great students, we have creative concepts, we have great teachers. The instruments are, with the exception of woodwinds, are basically the same, especially in the percussion family. There is a lot of similarity from a great marching band program to a great drum corps program. Now, we get into ages and abilities. We have primarily college kids, or we have, high school freshmen. There's going to be some differences, unless you're in Texas. There's going to be some differences in ability levels. Those guys do some crazy stuff down there. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So the biggest difference would definitely be the instrumentation and what that presents from a sonic design standpoint and what choices I'm going to make. As I've gotten older, this is where all the young people are going to shake, I'm shaking my finger. As I've gotten older, I write more rests. I really do, especially in regards to marching band with the woodwind color. I used to want every phrase to be something special for percussion. And if it wasn't about us, we're going to sneak something in that, because selfishly, I wanted that for percussion. And I also feel really guilty when a client is paying me really well to send them a bunch of rests. I really feel guilty about that. But the judging experience, the life experience, just being around it, 30 plus years, the right call a lot of times is less. And especially in regards to woodwind. So that would be the biggest difference. There's not a percussion judge, at least in the Bands of America. format. There's not a specific person crediting that. It's part of the big picture, which honestly, I love that. Drum corps, we do have that specific individual. And so that is a big difference in terms of instead of just playing a chord, I'm going to play this chord with some fancy variations. So it's still the chord, but now we're doing something more with it. So hopefully we're, for the student and for the audience, there's something a little bit more advanced in how we're treating that moment. But yeah, it's there's a lot of similarity between the two. And I would say what's more different is just program to program, not even drum corps to marching band. It's just program to program, and again, back to what we talked about, what they share as their goals, their parameters. So
yeah, I always feel like my main job is to write the exact right show for those kids in that situation, for that director, with that band personality, with that community. Like, that's a lot of things to fear, but that's my job. You sort of said this a couple of times. I just want to make sure and sort of that I'm getting this. It seems to me like leaving all this space that we've been sort of talking about, putting these rests in, especially important in the world of marching band because of the woodwind voice, right?
Yeah.
So that would lead you to probably tend to put more space even in a marching band show or competitive marching band show than in a drum corps show. Somebody said to me one time in a conversation that they felt like they had to put more music and notes and ask more of the musician in drum corps because of what it was. The drum corps, the animal of the activity, they're spending all summer. They want to have stuff to play and work on. Is that a consideration, I assume?
Yes. I find that to be like, I want my cake and eat it too. I want it to be super musical and appropriate and work with the big picture, but I also want it to fulfill all that criteria separately as a percussion section. Right. And that is, I struggle with that too, because at Crown this weekend, brass sounds wonderful and they don't need anything from us. So I'm putting some rests there, so that the whole world can enjoy this brass moment. Whereas, there is a temptation to be like, man, is there something we could contribute? Is there something we could do? But again, I think this is just age, and experience. I'm like, no, the most effective thing right there is just to enjoy that brass sound for that phrase. And then we come back. But when we come back, there's a responsibility for that next phrase to have some value and some advanced concepts and some vocabulary on par. So that's a situational phrase by phrase kind of decision. That's, big picture. Do we do enough? I definitely ask that question. And then phrase by phrase, are we doing the right thing in this phrase for the show? Yes. Cool. Is there something even more creative we could do? Because this sounds fine and this sounds like the original, but how can I, I'm going to lose some sleep and find even a cooler thing for us to do in this moment. So that's an intangible for sure that is always present.
Yeah, which is your responsibility as a designer and arranger for one of the top corps in the world, is to spend those sleepless nights figuring out and bringing that level of expertise, which you are. I also have an impression as a non-percussionist. Now, I'm going to premise this. Okay. I have the impression that the way the activity has been changing actually allows percussionists to have more moments of their own and have more meat at appropriate times than maybe was true back at a certain time when they were kind of accompanying a lot of brass playing along for long stretches.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's really dependent on the brass book in the drum corps world. That's specific to that content. I would say yes and no, because we used to have, good or bad, I'm not assigning value to this. We used to have a percussion judge that would come all the way onto the field. And now that those individuals have been asked out of their safety and the safety of everybody, and I wouldn't want to run out on the field, so I totally get it. Out of their safety, they are restricted to what they can get a read on. So it's the designer's job. This falls, to the team, but, visual designers as well, to get the battery percussion specifically up front so that it can be sampled and enjoyed and credited and,
Right.
make its way to the judge. So yes and no. Like I feel like when we were buried in the back of the field in the early 2000s, we were maybe doing different stuff than we would nowadays, knowing that someone was going to be back there, or we're not doing anything, or I mean, it's a unique dynamic that I try again to filter and consider.
Yeah.
But I think what it's done, and what I hope it's done as a front ensemble arranger, it's put those percussion adjudicators in front of the front ensemble more.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that grow, as just content and the ability of students and staff and how that's being utilized. I've been very excited to see that take off, in the last 10 years.
Insight. Yeah, I like the way you said that. All of this is really about clarity, right? Like over the last few years, whenever I talk to someone really smart like yourself who's designing and writing at a really high level, they mention that, right? And you mentioned that the space, the when do we not play, what's appropriate. It's really all about making the clarity for the judge and for the viewer.
Yeah. So, there's the clarity of just playing well and making good sounds and playing together. And let's assume that happens, which it doesn't always, but let's just, for the sake of the argument. But then it's the clarity of, have I accidentally put the marimbas in a low register while bass clarinets are doing something? And now, even if we play clear and they play clear, there's just the acoustics. There's a science of what we're doing. That could also be something you plan for, and then you see the drill and you're like, oh, wow, this takes place in such a location that I need to rethink because I'm drawing the eye and the ear up front and they're now over there. That's a little bit of it could even be an activity. I call it traffic. Like I use that term a lot as a judge, it's like great cars, clean cars that run well, but there's just so much traffic. How can we eliminate some of that traffic and have more clarity just from a focus standpoint? So that's part of it too. Is just what to play. Absolutely, that can cause clarity or make things unclear. But when to play, that's the other thing. And then sometimes moving a suspended cymbal from side 2 of the front ensemble to side 1 now just magically makes it a part of this idea on side 1, and it blends better, versus when it's on side 2, it pulls you away and creates, a focus issue, but a clarity issue at the same time. So geography is a part of it too.
That is very interesting. So what's I'm thinking about as you're saying all this is really interesting stuff, Cliff. I love this. That the other factor that I think I'm sure must play in, but that I'm so aware of, is that marching bands don't have the amount of time that drum corps do. So drum corps have the whole summer to figure out, should we move that suspended cymbal? I feel like with a lot of marching band programs, they're very limited. It kind of needs to be really right as early as possible. Is that a consideration for your writing as you're thinking about it?
Yeah, less of that, because I also think in the marching band world, through a high school, you have that student for 4 years. You have that student year round. You're able to get some culture and some style and some habits in place, and everybody's coming from the same place. Whereas a drum corps, even the best kids on the planet, they might come from a variety of styles, a variety of approaches. The audition process accommodates for that and looks for that. Drum corps, I got to be careful how I say that. I feel like there's the opportunity for drum corps to get more advanced concepts cleaner, because we are spending day after day consistently together long periods of time in a short period of time. Whereas marching bands have the advantage of having a kid for 4 whole years, year round, but it's more spread out. So the consistency of rehearsals, uh, yeah, it has a different bearing for sure on the product and probably what we ask of them. And again, as soon as you say that, you've challenged someone and they're like, I'll show you. And then there's some really, what some of these high school bands are able to do is on par, with what a drum corps is putting out there. So those are rare. I would say that's the exception, but yeah, for the most part, there's definitely a benefit to having everybody every day for 3 months, 8 hours a day. You can create some details, you can create some clarity for sure. And then there's also a benefit to having a kid for 4 years and being able to work with them almost every day for less time. So I don't know, a little bit of a toss up, but not a lot of bearing on the arranging necessarily.
Yeah, no, you answered that really clearly, and you mentioned some angles on it that I hadn't considered. So that all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So you talked about program to program. It's often different. That I think is the key, right? We talked about finding the right thing for this group of kids in this year with this director, with this whatever. So
Yes. Yeah.
I would think that's one of the really most time consuming parts of an arranger's job, is to make sure they know the program and they get that information. I feel like that's where some people break down, is they don't take the time to figure all that out before they start writing.
Yeah, I have it's kind of evolved through the years. And again, I'm very grateful. I've been doing this. I think my first group I wrote for was, I'm not going to say the number, it was a long time ago. And
you can do numbers. I didn't mean to put you off of that. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started writing for Drumline in 1993, my first Drumline,
Cool.
in Missouri, a rural group. And, skill set, being creative, but then also I've built a survey that I send to all my clients that it gets to the heart of what they're looking for. What are their goals? And I always preface, there's no wrong answer. We want to be competitive, or we want to be entertaining. We want to be educational. And I've had groups say, we want to win a drum trophy. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to do more in places. But the point with the survey is it gives me a fighting chance day one to send this program a fully customized arrangement that matches not only their students' ability levels, and they might have like a freakish great timpani player, and they might have younger vibraphones, so I'll build not only an arrangement that accommodates for that, but a setup so that we are putting younger players in favorable positions where it's easier for them to listen and to have a lifeline for timing, for balance, for blend. And then I write to the ability, I write to the instrumentation. I mean, it can be pretty deflating if you open up this really cool arrangement and it's written for a low F marimba and you only have a low A marimba. That can throw a giant speed bump day one. So the goal for me as an arranger is my clients open the music and it's customized to that year, who they have, who they don't have, what they have, and then the goals of what they're wanting to do. So, and I'm not going to say that there's 1,000 different versions of that. There's some similarities year to year, program to program, region to region, but it does kind of, I think, make me do better work for that group, because they open it up and that glockenspiel part is really easy. That timpani part is really hard. Both those kids are happy and it fits the show. And so.
Yeah. Like I said, I feel like our job is to write for that exact situation and those exact kids whenever possible. I do want to ask one question, Clif. You and I have written for some schools where the situation of the community and the program itself, there was sometimes a lot of we're not sure who
Yep.
we're going to have. That is just like another puzzle, right? Like, okay, I have to write something where a part can be needed or not. Is that the way you deal with that?
Yeah, that's really difficult because usually that situation, the way to approach that would be a rewrite. Once they do know, and
Right.
it's like, hey, we don't have this timpani kid, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's so much content in there. What are we going to do? That's almost a rewrite at that point. And I feel for those programs that might not know that, and um, that yeah, that's frustrating. That's really hard because you want it to fit them perfectly. And if
Right.
something changed, I have had groups that have been, hey, we had 4 kids move in this week. We need 4 more parts, for front ensemble. They're not adding them visually necessarily. So I've done that. And it usually, if I've done the initial work correctly, that usually isn't too big of a deal because everything that I've already done has intent and there's a reason and I know why I did what I did. So now it's just like, how can I'll take that one triangle part and I'll turn it into 2, and now there will be kind of a conversation of triangles. So there's ways to do that, but it does take extra time for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that you're not going to answer, but I'm still going to say.
Okay.
So you write for drum corps, you write for marching bands, you write for indoor drum line, and probably I know you've probably written for kazoo band at this point. I don't know, like you've done so much cool stuff. Like, can you admit, like, do you get more excited about one or the other? Is it seasonal? Like, how do you feel when you're like, okay, well, I'm getting to start writing for this drum corps now? Is that like extra adrenaline? I know you don't want to answer this, so I shouldn't even ask
No,
you.
no. I think that's a great question. I've never thought of it in those terms. My first love, which is none of these things, is percussion ensemble, concert percussion ensemble.
Which you have written a
So
lot of, and that's congrats, by the
yeah,
way, for all that. That's very cool.
yeah.
I'm glad
Thank
you
you.
said that.
That's my, and I think it's for, I think it's for creative reasons. It's also selfishly, as a control freak. It's just me, and it's not determined by a wind arrangement or a brass arrangement. It's kind of my playground where I can make this longer, I can make this shorter, I can So for me, percussion ensemble is kind of my. Some people play golf, some people have hobbies. That's what I like to do in my in between time, but it's seasonal, like I get excited for spring, I get excited for fall. um it's yeah. And I think I think it works because there's seasons. We pour our heart into the fall season, we get to grand nationals, there's a break, and then we're putting our energy into this similar but different activity, and that takes us through the summer. And it's a nice balance. I think if we did year round one or the other, I think that would get hard. But I really do like both equally, and I personally, and I think a lot of people would say, it's nice to have that switch so that you
Gosh,
don't get burnt out.
yeah. It's so interesting you said that because this is one of my big concerns for everybody, Cliff. And maybe you've just put my mind at ease a little bit. But like, I get worried about the activity these days because it seems to never stop. And I feel like these people are being creative and the performers are performing at this high level day after day after day after day. And even if there's like you get a week off and then you're into the next thing, and yeah, even if it's different, I worry about people, not really stopping and having any space in their life
Yeah.
for this. Now you've just sort of described one of the ways that works for you is that, okay, this
Mhm.
is different and I'm turning my brain on a different way. Is that kind of how you deal with it? Or do you have any other advice for people? Because I do worry about people
Yeah.
getting completely burned out on just the
So
constancy.
I was there. So recovering burnout, because I was doing the BOA marching scene, I was doing the WGI indoor scene, and then I was doing drum corps. For me, I actually haven't written for indoor drumline in about 5 years. As a WGI judge, there's some great, very clear rules about not being involved in groups that we're going to adjudicate.
Sure.
And I really love the adjudication side of it. It inspires me. I get great ideas. It keeps me fresh. It keeps my ears fresh. I get to see all these people and have all these relationships and travel. I couldn't do all three well, me personally. So for me, I don't do the indoor creative side, just the adjudication side. And that has been a great adjustment that has really given me balance. I can now be a fan of every single indoor group instead of obsessing over one that is mine. I would share, I think that's the hardest activity that there is because it's not always school based. It's just weekends. It's pulling together all these resources. There's so much that goes behind the scenes with the indoor groups that it's a miracle that they're able to do amazing things that they do. So having done that, I knew that that piece of the puzzle for me was going to be too much. So yeah, so if you think of it, I think of it, there's 3 activities that overlap all year. I'm doing 2 of those. Okay. And I'm adjudicating, indoor because I still want to be involved. I still love it. And I get so much out of it. But to design for all 3, there's people that do it and they're amazing. For me personally, that was too much. That's where I now have my percussion ensemble, my concert percussion ensemble work in that's my little vacation within, if I'm writing an arrangement of yours and I'm like, I need a break. It's either a physical break or I might move to a percussion ensemble piece and just, this is totally different. I'm still being productive. I'm still getting stuff done. But yeah, to do all 3 is a lot, Tim. There are people that do it, and I don't know. That's crazy.
I don't either, but I love how you describe that. You're sort of giving yourself this palate cleanser, and you're using a different part of your brain and experiencing the activity from a completely different angle. That all seems so healthy to me. So I'm really glad that you found that balance. Yeah. And I love the way you described.
My wife is really glad too. My wife is really glad.
I'm sure your whole family. And I love the percussion ensemble part, and people can contact you and get you to write something for them, right?
Yeah, I do commissions. I've been.
How do they reach you?
Blessed. I do not have a website, which is kind of a rebellious move. So it would either be through probably the University of Missouri or Carolina Crown. Both of those websites will have contact information, ways to get a hold of me.
Everybody, they can find you online. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or everybody ask me and I'll put you in touch with Cliff. But Cliff, I love that you do that. Like, I feel like I want to support that part of you because it's sort of, I feel like it's sort of where you get your veggies and get to play and you have that freedom. Like that completely resonates with me. I completely understand that.
Yeah, no, I love it. There's crossover, it's not like I'm not playing golf. It's those experiences have direct benefits to the other activities. The more I'm learning about the instruments, the more I'm spending time behind the instruments and discovering, like I've written percussion ensembles and been like, ooh, I'm saving that idea. That's something I would like to use outdoors. So yeah, there's a huge relationship and correlation between all of that. But yeah, it's the percussion ensemble thing. I also love, and this would probably be, common sense, but like drum corps and marching band, love them. That show has a shelf life, and that show is finite. After finals, it's done. And percussion ensemble, it's been really cool to hear the same piece year after year. And it still has life, and a new high school is programming it, or a new university is playing a different, an old piece. So it's kind of cool to have the staying power of the concert percussion ensemble too. Selfishly, I enjoy that.
Well, I mean, I feel ridiculous saying this, but when I first met you 24 years ago, I was like, okay, this guy is going places, and I'm really glad I met him, and he's so smart, and I like him, and like that. It's been cool for me to be one of those people that got to like watch everything that you've done and grown, and like now you're like this superstar celebrity activity. I know you don't think so, but I do. And I just want to say congratulations. Like I feel like you and your family have done so much right. You know what I mean? Like you've been able to like do all this great work and have this career and make this living, and your family's awesome, and you've had a balance. And like, I just feel like I want to tip my hat to you and Christy and your whole situation, your family, because
thanks,
that's
Tim.
hard too.
It is hard. And, you know, for people watching this, there's hard days. I mean, for sure. And there's been hard seasons, and there are days where I don't feel like doing it. So if I don't want to come across as like everything is wonderful. I mean, it's hard work, but I would say the biggest advice, you know, this is general, not specific maybe to arranging, but is just, I've had kind of the mantra of just do it, do the small stuff really well, do the little things really well, whatever's in front of me. And it's hard. There's days where I don't want to, so I'm confessing, but just do what's in front of you versus dreaming about what you might want to do 6 months from now, or, wow, I want this thing 10 years from now. I was out of drum corps for 10 years. And instead of waiting around for an opportunity, I really tried to do the little stuff that was in front of me. So if that's a little band from Tennessee, or that's a big band from Indianapolis, I really think that is the secret to my success, if you want to call it that, is just really doing the little stuff, and that led to more stuff. And also having healthy relationships, you know, being nice to people. I've meet so many people that I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, I judged your band 10 years ago. And, you know, just yeah, trying to be a good person doesn't always work. I try hard. But yeah, doing the little stuff really well.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of success has come from, building on that.
Both of those pieces of advice.
I appreciate the kind words,
Tim.
Oh,
of course. But both those pieces of advice are amazing, because I'm always tell everybody, it is a small little band world. Like, you know, like everybody knows everybody, and you're always going to run into somebody again. Never burn a bridge. Like you said, I feel like, Clif, that you've become someone that people are happy to see walk in the room and sorry to see you leave. And I feel like that's what we all need to try to be, right? Like, don't be that diva. Don't be that difficult person. And that makes, gosh, everybody, if you're listening to this, that is so important. And the second thing I loved is you're very present in what am I doing right now? And I'm going to do this thing to the best of my ability really well and give it everything I have. And then I go to the next thing and not look too far ahead. I love that.
Yeah. And that's hard, but that is the recipe for sure. That's really paid off. So yeah, but thanks for the kind words. You've been a big part of my growth and experience, and you've always been so supportive. So I too am glad we met many years ago.
Well, Clif, I think you're awesome, and I've loved our relationship and working together and getting to know you and your family, and I'm just like, I feel thrilled that I know you and have had this long working relationship with you. Like, it's been really a joy for me. So, and thank you for taking time to stop in your middle of your super busy time and share this with me and my audience.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim.